Welcome to the Next Level Facebook Ads Podcast with Phil Graham. We help you master Facebook ads and give you an unfair advantage over your competition. Are you ready? Let's go.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Next Level Facebook Ads Podcast, episode 411. I'm Phil Graham. Today, we're going to talk about Facebook and Instagram ad budgets. I'm going to give you some tips on how I recommend you not overspend and how I think you should start spending smarter as it relates to your ads. So one of the most common questions I get is about budgets. How much should I spend? When should I scale? What do I do when it's not working? Am I spending too much? Am I spending too little? There's so many questions that people have as it relates to budget. Some of this stuff is going to be very particular and specific to you and your exact situation. But I can also give some good general advice too that should help a lot of people in a broad sense. Before we dive into this stuff, you guys are looking for some help with your ads. Maybe you want some one-on-one coaching and consulting to help you get to that next level or start something new or overcome, a stumbling block. Or maybe you want somebody to run your ads for you. For either of those things, just go to my website, philgrahamdigital.com, or you can DM me on Instagram at philgrahamdigital, and I would love to connect with you. So let's dive right in and keep this episode short, sweet, and full of value and very actionable. I want to start talking about some of the biggest mistakes I see with budgets as it relates to Facebook and Instagram ads. So one mistake I see a lot of people make is spending way too little. I see advertisers that their ad spend does not match their expectations of what they want for results, for one thing. And I also see advertisers that sometimes run, I hope you're not doing this, but tons of inexpensive ads, like $5 a day. Like they might have 10, 15, 20 ads that are $5 a day. If this is you, oh my gosh, stop doing it that way. Call me, email me. You need help if you're doing that. Do not do that. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, you don't want to be running 20 ads that are $5 a day. So that's a big issue if you're spending too little, especially if you're doing a bunch of ads that are too little. That is even worse. So you have to have a normal expectation of what you're spending and what the result can be. Now, you can still have a small budget and do well and grow your business and grow your ads. There's just certain ways you have to go about it. So you got to be careful. But if you have a good budget, but you're spending a tiny amount with a bunch of ads and you're expecting this big result, that's an issue that I believe is a big mistake and not a smart way to spend your money. Mistake number 2 is spending too much too fast. So I am not somebody that advocates for spending at the top of your budget, especially right away. So if you told me I could spend up to $100 a day, I want to start running ads, I probably would not start at that $100 a day mark. There are some exceptions depending on the situation, but most likely I would start a little lower than that to test some things. And then I would scale once I saw what was happening. But a lot of people spend way too much too fast without the right data, or they have the data, but they're just not using it and they're making big mistakes. So you got to be careful with that. Be a little conservative, but not too conservative. But be kind of conservative at first. Look at the data to see what works. Find out why it's working, and then you can scale that up. But be careful that you're not spending too much too fast before you have some good data. Mistake number 3, there's a lot of people that just throw money at ads that are not doing well. If they want better results, they're like, well, maybe if I spend more, it'll just work magically. Instead of actually figuring out what the problem is, whether it's an audience problem or a creative or the offer or a conversion issue on the other side of the ad. You don't want to just blindly throw more money at an ad that's not performing. That is a recipe for failure. And then mistake number 4, this happens a lot. We talked about it in last week's episode, is really ignoring the back end. Like if your landing page or sales page or funnel or your checkout is not optimized or isn't loading fast or isn't loading properly on mobile or anything like that. Even the best ads, even with a great budget, may not convert well. So you got to make sure you pay attention to everything from the ad to whatever the end result is of somebody either contacting you or buying from you. So those are some, budget mistakes that I would consider mistakes. So what I want to do now is kind of talk to you about how I would allocate some of your budget. And again, this is broad. Okay. So if I was working with you personally, it might be a little bit different based off of your situation, but for broad, this should be good for, a broad spectrum of people. So I've got a rule. I don't always follow this. Again, there's variables, but I've got a 75-25 rule where typically around 75% of the budget I put towards something that's already working. This is assuming you already have something that's working and you know it's working and you know why. So I put a large part of the budget towards scaling those proven winners, 75%. And then the 25% is for testing. So whether I'm testing new audiences, new creatives, new offers, new placements, or any number of things, I typically have about 25% of my budget going towards that testing. And, a lot of people ask me, well, how do you know what ad you should scale? And there's a lot of things I look at. Of course, I look at cost to get a customer or lead. I look at return on ad spend. I look at what our link click-through rate is, what the CPM is, and some other factors. But I look at metrics. I look at data and I figure out why it's working and then I scale it. That's how I identify what's worth scaling. Most people really don't do that. They might either ignore the data or not really look at it with a high level of skill. And that can be a challenge. That can be an issue, something that could potentially negatively affect you. And then let's talk about like where your budget should go. So for example, you've got this big budget or small, whatever, but it's for Facebook ads, it's for creatives, Instagram, all that stuff. So you got to look at a couple different things. Campaign type. Should you only focus on one campaign type or should you have multiple? It's going to depend on a lot of factors. It's kind of an obvious no-brainer to work with sales and the conversions optimization for a lot of people. But there's going to be situations where you might want to also do a lead campaign or possibly a video views or an engagement. So some of your budget might go towards multiple types of campaigns. Another thing that you want to do is your creatives, whether you create them for free or have them made for you. I do recommend having a mix, having some video ads and having obviously some images and even trying to get some UGC. Sometimes you got to pay for that. Other times you can get it for free, but you want to kind of work that in as well to your budgeting. And then obviously there's audience testing. So I definitely highly recommend that you take your budget and you test some different audiences. Don't just do Advantage Plus. I think that's a huge mistake. Test segmented audiences along with it, test retargeting and different things like that. But make sure that with this plan, you're testing different audiences. And then a lot of people will ask me like top of the funnel versus bottom of the funnel. What do I do? How much, do I put towards what? And this is a tricky question because it's really going to depend on a lot of variables specific to you again. But in general, I would say I would probably allocate 60 to 80% of my budget at the top of the funnel and 20 to 40% at the bottom of the funnel for retargeting. Now that's going to, vary wildly based off of each individual situation, but that's kind of like a general range that I would shoot for. And then within that range, kind of like I talked about a few minutes ago, 75% of that would go to stuff that's already working, and then 25% of that would go towards testing. If somebody's really new and they don't really have anything working, then it's all going to go towards testing. But these things can really make a big difference. I see a lot of people make mistakes when it comes to their budgets. So if you've ever kind of wondered where your Facebook budget should go, how much you should spend, I hope this helped. The key is to spend smarter. Regardless of how much you spend, it's about spending as smart as possible. And you've really got to look at that data and determine what's working, what's not, and why, and go off of that. Don't do it based off of emotion or anything like that, because that's where a lot of people make mistakes. And as always, just a reminder, it's always important to point out that every business is unique. Results can vary. There's no guaranteed outcomes. So always keep that in mind. So I hope this was helpful. Episode 411 is in the books. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you want to get in touch, philgrahamdigital.com is the website, or you can DM me on Instagram at philgrahamdigital. I would love to connect with you. Otherwise, I hope you guys have an amazing week, and I will talk to you on next week's episode. Peace out.
Thanks for listening to the Next Level Facebook Ads Podcast. Please remember to subscribe and share this with all your friends. For show notes, more tips, and to learn more about Phil, please visit philgrahamdigital.com/podcast.